recognizes Mr. Bishop for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Mayorkas, Mr. Guest previously made a point of your testimony, bottom of page 2. It says, since April 2020, the number of encounters at the border has been elevated. And just to put a finer point on what he says, here's what elevated looks like. You see that blue line, you're familiar with this, and just for the sake of the committee and members of the public may be looking, that blue line at the top that goes up higher than any other line and then levels out, that's elevated. And by your expectation, last time we were together in March, you anticipated that the highest levels on a sustained basis in over 21 years. Here's another chart of it. This is the Biden administration here. You see what happened in the Trump administration, curtailed, and then this enormous continuing spike. Your understatement suggests that the administration's out of touch with the dynamics of this situation. And also, Secretary Mayorkas, you say in that same statement that the number of encounters has been elevated, quote, due to ongoing violence, natural disasters, food insecurity, and poverty in the Northern Triangle countries. You do know, don't you, that the principal cause of this surge is changes in policy by the Biden administration from the previous administration, and the factors that you cite were prevalent in the Trump administration and prior administrations as well. So that didn't cause the change. Would you agree, sir?
I would respectfully disagree with you, Congressman. We have those of us who have addressed challenges at the border for many, many years have seen spikes, decreases, spikes again, decreases again. It's a very dynamic situation, and it is overdue that we address the root causes of irregular migration.
Well, you're often talking about what we ought to do. I'm just asking you about the cause as you've deciphered it. And I understand, I'll take your answer that you don't agree with me. When I had 5 minutes with you in March, I asked you whether you expected that the administration's changes in policy would trigger this surge, or you were surprised by that development. And you said that you had no expectation either way, but we did what we had to do. Now, let me say this: I don't know that I had any particular expectation one way or the other. I just knew what we needed to do when we confront a situation, and in fact, we're doing it. But as this has developed, it's true. I've learned, and it's true, isn't it, that the CBP briefed incoming Biden administration officials that the contemplated changes to policy, such as suspending or terminating MPP, would lead to exactly this surge.
Congressman, when I had the privilege of engaging with you back in March, the concern was the overcrowding of Border Patrol facilities.
Yes, sir. I'm not asking you on a different tangent, Mr. Secretary. I'm just asking you whether or not you were briefed that these changes would lead to this type of surge. Yes or no?
If I may, I was not.
Yes or no?
I was not.
You won't answer the question.
If I may have a moment.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Bishop, please allow the witness to answer the question, and you can then follow up.
I'd be glad for him to elaborate, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like him to answer that question.
Congressman, I was briefed on the border situation when I assumed office. In addition, if I may, when we engaged in March, the focus was on the overcrowding of Border Patrol facilities by unaccompanied children. I said then that we had a plan and that we were executing on our plan and that it would take time. The situation in the Border Patrol facilities is drastically different than it was then. In fact, we did execute on our plan.
I'll reclaim my time, of which I've only got about another 30 seconds, Mr. Secretary. Tens of thousands of migrants have been admitted into the country on the premise of having an asylum claim. And I understand that the majority, maybe the vast majority, are determined not to be valid. What is the administration doing to remove from the country those whose asylum claims have either not being pursued any further or have been determined invalid?
Families congressmen who make claims for asylum under the laws of the United States, placed in immigration proceedings to seek to advance those claims. If those claims are granted by an immigration judge, they are granted asylum under our laws. If those claims are rejected by a judge and appeals prove unsuccessful, those individuals are removed from the United States in accordance with law.
Mr. Chairman, in light of my time having expired, I request unanimous consent for the submission of these two charts that I displayed during the testimony. Thank you, sir, and I yield back.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair